Hey everyone, this episode is brought to you by River, the place that I personally go to securely invest in Bitcoin with confidence and with zero fees.
Scarce and desirable. With that as a fundamental way to think about it, there is literally nothing on earth that is both digital, frankly, even analog anymore, and more scarce than Bitcoin. It is truly finite. It is just dumb. Nothing else is going to win. No other asset's going to win on scarcity.
So, Tad, this is where I want to start. A week ago, 2 weeks ago, there was this auction that happened with Sotheby's. And this was like the shot heard around the world back, I want to say back in 2019. There was an artist, he goes, and correct me if I'm getting any of this wrong, but there was an artist, I think this happened down in Miami, had a banana, duct tapes it to a canvas. It sells, I think it was selling for like 150, 200,000, somewhere in that ballpark. Everybody online was talking about how absurd this is that somebody could do this and sell it for those kinds of prices. So if that wasn't enough, this past week, 2 weeks ago, this comes back up again. I think it's the same art, and I think this art is called Comedian, and this just sold for $6.2 million. And for people in the Bitcoin space, they're well aware of Justin Sun was the buyer, but he wasn't the only person. I think the bidding started off at like $800,000 for this banana duct taped to a canvas. Help us make this make sense. This makes no sense whatsoever. Help us understand what in the world.
Yeah, it gives new meaning to the word banana zone, doesn't it? So first of all, let's talk about piece of art so everybody's clear on what it is. And by the way, Justin Sun told the media that he planned to eat the banana. So what is it exactly? And by the way, is it a real banana? It's a very frequent question. So it turns out what he actually bought was not a banana and not a piece of duct tape. He bought a little certificate from the artist named Maurizio Catalan that says he can go out, buy some duct tape and tape a banana to the wall, and it's a piece of art. And he paid $6.2 million for it, including the fees. How is this even possible?
So he didn't even get a banana to eat.
He doesn't even get a banana. Well, I think he probably got the one that was in the auction room. But the point is, what he gets is the right to eat a banana and take another banana and put it up there. And so he gets the right to go to Walmart and pay 26 cents for a banana and tape it to the wall and call it world-class art.
I'm so confused. I think anybody hearing this, if you lined up 100 people off the street, right, I think 99, if not 100 of them would say, this is insane. This makes no sense.
It's crazy.
Crazy.
And moreover, to your point that you made, he wasn't the only bidder.
Yeah, right.
There were a lot of people with a lot of money lining up to bid for Maurizio Catalan's comedian. It's banana. And it's such an interesting moment of the times, right? Because it goes to what is value? What is money? Where does money come from? Where does it go to? Why do people, is it crazy that a banana, which costs 26 cents in Walmart, could go for 24 million times that in Sotheby's? From my perspective, there's so much to, I hesitate to say unwrap, if you will, in this, that I think it really is a good place to go to, because it goes to the question of value. Why do things have value? Why would a banana be worth $6 million in one context and 26 cents in another? Why would a dollar be worth something here and something else be there? Why would a piece of code have value? And that's really about, frankly, when you get to it, it's really about evolution. When you think about we as a species, we tell stories. I mean, there's objective reality. There's a wonderful book out currently, Harari's Nexus, that goes into this. Objective reality is a mountain. There's a window behind me. There's a rock. My dog is playing in the yard. Then there's subjective reality, which is what I think is going on. But also there's a reality between you and me, Preston, and a reality about all the people that listen to your show, and also that are in the world, which is called what he calls an almost an intersubjective reality, which is a storytelling reality. And our species is really highly evolved to tell stories. And the stories create movements, they create religions, they create manias, they create all these things. And guess what else? They create money and they create value and they create a stock market. And so when you look around why things have value and what things they are, what you have to understand is it goes back to things have value because we say they do. And the fundamental insight I had that was not immediately intuitive, I don't think it is intuitive to me. I thought the US dollar had value because you have to pay your taxes in it. Yes, check. It is a highly, highly valuable form of currency. And the utility of the dollar is phenomenal. It's really a great instrument. And yet, if we all held hands together tomorrow and we said, Preston, the dollar isn't worth anything, guess what? The dollar crashes. And that's a really, again, an insight, which means there's no difference between that and looking at a Picasso and saying, well, it's just paint and canvas, so why should it cost $20 million? Or the most extreme example that you started with, which is a banana that is 26 cents in Walmart and $6.2 million in Sotheby's, and you don't even get the banana. I mean, think about it.
I like this idea that you're saying that the way we're wired is around this idea of stories and how powerful the stories are. And so, I'm just going to throw this out there. So my take on this, right, with the banana. This is a social flex. This is a story around a person. And, I have no problem calling Justin that he's socially flexing. He's going out and he's saying $6.2 million is so meaningless to me because I'm so insanely wealthy that I can go buy this banana duct taped to a canvas and I'm going to eat the banana. And I know I can get the banana for 19 cents and I don't care. I am showing you how insanely wealthy I am is what I think the story is that's wrapped around it. Now I had read that the other bidders were wanting to buy it because they were going to give it to Elon Musk, or at least one of them was, or something like that. And so that's a story. The person wanted to be able to give Elon this crazy, super weird thing. Maybe they're trying to suggest that he's an idiot and here's I have no idea what the story is, but you're right. There is a story that was attached to the insane amount of money that was being spent. And for these people that have a net worth of, call it $1 billion or whatever, $6.2 million is pretty meaningless to them. And
exactly.
The whole world is going to talk about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now let's step back from the story, which I think you've nailed on its fame. And we're going to set aside the banana for just a minute and talk about a piece of art.
Yeah.
Art. You have two almost identical necklaces, and one is magnificent. Let's say exactly the same carats, exactly the same gems, exactly the same era. One just happens to have been worn by Marie Antoinette. So the piece can have a story.
Yeah.
And admittedly, it has all the same advantages of owning it. You tell your friends, what I just put my wife in, that was once worn by Marie Antoinette. By the way, I'm not sure that's a compliment. And nonetheless, you step back and you say, okay, well, that piece is a story. And then you realize, wait, whether it is an NFT, an ordinal art, or frankly, the Pettibone behind me, the reason we buy things, the reason we pay more than the cost of materials is often because there's a story attached to them. It gives us a story. And by the way, it can be the one you said, which is it accrues to our social status. Mm-hmm. But often it's just the fact that the story creates value.
Yeah.
And so then there's a story about all these other things that I know you talk a lot about. There's a story about Bitcoin. There's a story about MicroStrategy. There's a story about crypto. There's a story about all these different things. And the story is what, in my mind, drives outsized value. Utility is a fundamental feature of many of these things. But frankly, for a lot of the value, it's not having to do with utility. It has to do with the story aspect.
Yeah. Where I start getting a major problem with some of this stuff, we go back to, I think it was 2022, this rock, this JPEG rock.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like there was one, there was the artist that put this out there. There was this shade of gray. There was that shade of gray. There was 100 of them that were sold at this shade of gray, and they were being sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm looking at this and some of me puts on this military lens, right? Because that's my background. I have a military background. And I'm saying, this is money laundering. These are people that just really want to be able to wash very dirty money. They want to buy something for some very subjective price and then try to offload it through marketing and through a story to then wash the money. And I know that's a very dark and negative turn to look at it, but I think the reason, and I don't know that I necessarily see this banana thing in that light, but I definitely see these JPEG rocks that were sold by the thousands, I think, definitely in the hundreds, because there was so much of it. And because the story gets really kind of wonky there when you're selling thousands of them, I don't know that I buy it. I think that there was something very convoluted and hidden underneath of it. And again, this is just Preston.
You're
idea.
You're right on track here.
Yeah.
So, one of the most powerful aspects of any story, one of the most powerful stories we have, is get rich quick.
Yeah.
So, meaning the notion that you can win a lottery ticket, the notion that tomorrow you can be free of all your financial burdens, that the notion that tomorrow you could be a billionaire is a fundamental story. And by the way, and it is almost like rocket fuel for other kinds of stories around it. And so, I'm not surprised. I'm old enough to remember what the real pet, Jamie Dimon talks about pet rocks. I'm old enough to remember real pet rocks. And they did never explode in value, but we know the stories of tulip bulbs and how those exploded in value and various other things. Or frankly, many cryptocurrencies or NFTs in earlier incarnations. And they have a story. There's a certain, oh my gosh, I'm on the inside, I'm an insider, the money is moving, I'm seeing my value go up and up and up. And that's a powerful, powerful reinforcing story.
Mm-hmm.
No question.
It's so hard. For me, when I'm looking at art, and I know art is subjective, everybody has a different point of view. I'm just looking at the proof of work. If a person sitting down with, I really enjoy looking at like pencil art that's very hyper realistic. And the person I know has spent thousands of hours just working on this, and the diligence and the attention to detail. And the fact that if I line up 100 people off the street, maybe one can even come close to replicating what I know is one copy. There's tons of proof of work. It's physical. It's there. Versus a picture of this that can be replicated, online as many times as the artist wants. It's just, to me, those two things are very, very different.
Yeah.
Very different from what I would be personally willing to pay. And I guess when I see some of the values of these things that people are willing to pay, I think it's more of a function of the times with respect to fiat and how grossly out of whack society has gotten between the haves and the have-nots that are demonstrating the prices of some of these crazy things that we're seeing online versus what we would see in what maybe I would call a somewhat under control market or a normalized market where the money is actually scarce and not just being printed by the trillions by clacking on some keys.
So many threads to pull on that. That's really powerful. We go down the thread about fiat, go down the thread about how long art could sustain value in a world where you do not have fiat sort of based system. And then we could also go down the thread, which is maybe interesting also at some point later on. Would you be willing to pay for art that's created by a machine and not a person? Meaning there's something inherently human that is required for you as part of the story for art. Because I literally sat on a conference. I was at a panel in Christie's in Hong Kong 3 or 4 weeks ago with a poet. And she creates art with a machine. And she called it not a tool, but a collaborator or a co-collaborator. So any one of the threads, we could go down all three. Where would you like to go?
Let's start off with the money. I love all that. Let's start off with the money and just kind of your thoughts on the fiat system and how broke and how it's divided society.
Yeah. So it starts with, from a layperson's perspective, and I count myself as a layperson in this, we can start with a simple question. Why does a house in Aspen and Palm Beach, I don't know, Hillsborough, Palo Alto, or East Hampton or Southampton, why do they cost so much? It's an interesting question. Why is it that Picasso can charge $20 million for a painting and something that looks exactly like it can be $5? Why is it that a necklace owned by Marie Antoinette or Josephine Bonaparte can be millions of dollars and the same necklace can be mere thousands of dollars? Why is it that mega cap tech stocks can have sustainable for over a long period of time? They can have very high multiples. And then, by the way, it's not far removed from inequality. And I step back and I say, well, you know what? One of the powerful things that we see is that when the government, for lack of a better way to say it, creates significant amounts of liquidity in the system, excess liquidity in the economy is like bees to the honeycomb on scarce and desirable assets. And that is such a powerful thing to see immediately. It sounds obvious. We talk often about, and instead of a clinical way, people that own assets do well, people that are renting out their labor in exchange for earnings or something like that, or sell bananas on the street corner, or the case might be, they don't do as well. But if you looked at just the money printer, if you looked at just liquidity and the powerful effect it has on not just assets per se, it's not all assets. By the way, not all assets go up when the money printer is running. It's the scarce and the desirable ones that go up.
Yes.
And that is why you see massive accumulations of wealth in highly concentrated areas where it's defined both desirability and scarcity. And interestingly, if you don't have that, then we could talk about how people have solved for that in where you don't have either scarcity or desirability. It's generally you lever up. But let's set that aside. If in the unlevered world, it's really those things. And that's it. And the secret to just observing, right? The secret to long-term wealth creation in a world where the money printer runs at a regular pace, we can debate whether it's 6.6 or 8.95 or whatever.
I love those numbers you're throwing.
That debate. We can have that debate. But if you just step back and you look at it, you see, that is how wealth is being accumulated. And guess what? If you own those assets and you just bought them cheaper and you held them, you didn't have to do anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You had to do nothing. And you get really, really, really rich. And that, by the way, and if you didn't have the money to do it, or you're selling your labor, you're doing these other things, you don't get rich unless you get really lucky.
Yeah. You got me thinking on this idea of a story being attached to art. And I want to go back to the other piece that you highlighted there on the previous question, but you got me thinking on this idea of a story. Do you find that some of the best investors in art are leaning into whatever that story is after they own, like, let's say you're just investing in art for the value add, right? You're just trying to see number go up on whatever piece you got. Do you find that some of these people that are buying it for investment purposes lean into the story of whatever that piece was to continue the marketing and the story propagation so that it becomes more valuable, call it when they try to sell it 5 or 10 years later? Is that part of the strategy?
But I want to add one other thing, which is they not only do it for the utility reason that you said, which is it enhances the value.
Yeah.
They do it because the story is irresistible. Meaning, in other words, the story, if I stretch to buy a painting or stretch to buy a banana, whatever it is, the story becomes part of me. And more importantly, I become part of the story. So you look at it, and as long as the banana is in existence, as long as Da Vinci's in existence, the Salvador Mundi, as long as any of these famous things that are in existence, I have become a part of that story forever.
So let's just play on this. Justin buys this banana canvas. He says he's going to eat it. Let's say he just does some weird stuff with it, right?
Yeah.
He only ate half of it. He puts it in some vault. It catches on fire in 2 years from now. And you're just like admonishing, and you're becoming part of this story. And then he's putting it into, these are the antics, or these are the things that potentially make I know this sounds crazy.
No,
I'm not suggesting this thing could go over 6 million in the future. I know all this is so crazy. I'm just trying to understand how a person dabbles or plays in this space and does it successfully. These are the things that like add to the story, right?
And guess what? When you're really, really super rich, not just merely rich, I'm talking super rich.
You need to do these types of things.
You realize that you're going to run out of time. Now, maybe you can make the best investment in the world and work on your health and always get through this, but you are going to run out of time. So how do you transcend time? Well, you can build a pyramid, build a skyscraper. You can do a lot of different things, But one is how do you create a story or how do you pick by a story and weave yourself into a story that transcends your own mortality. This is not a new thing. This is a timeless thing, and it's part of us. And there you go.
This is interesting. This has me thinking. This is very fun. Let's talk about the AI and the assisted poetry and things like that. So in general, what are your thoughts?
So in general, Christie's hasn't sort of, apparently the panel that I spoke on is off the record, so they won't release it, which is fine. I respect that. But I will say some things that I said on there. One is I predicted that within 10 years, nearly all art will be created by machines. Yeah, pause for a minute, right? Because isn't our fundamental premise that when AI replaces all of our jobs, we're all going to be doing art? Well, interestingly, some of the best art, in my opinion, that's emerging right now is actually done in collaboration with machines. And the thing is, we think about machines as a paintbrush, as a tool. You know, the computer is a tool that helps me create art. We're way beyond that now, Preston. We are in the world where the artist has a partner, and the partner is a machine. The machine is bringing more out of the artist, and the artist bringing more out of the machine. So the artists are, in effect, both the machine and the person. And so art, which is an endeavor of our species, I would say is no longer an exclusive endeavor of our species. And moreover, I would say as we go forward, I'm not even sure we'll be the best artists. And I don't know how else to say it. That's pretty direct.
Yeah. I mean, it does make sense, because when I'm just looking at the tools that people have at their disposal, let's say I am trying to do a hand sketched pencil art, whatever.
Yeah.
My ability to tap into AI to help me kind of craft new ideas, whatever, how to, do a certain corner of the painting of the picture, because I want it to look a certain way. How else are you going to be able to get this? And I can run it through AI 1,000 times until I find exactly what I'm looking for, and then I can replicate that onto the paper. I think as a tool, I just don't know how artists are going to be able to not be using it in a way. And I don't even know how anyone would be able to prove that they aren't using it in the manner that I just described, right? Like,
I think you're right. But I think it's also important to see that the AI, the large language models and the neural networks behind them, they're both modeled after and improvements on our own brain.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, the very brain that you and I are lucky enough to have that's creative and creates things, there is a machine or non-biological version of that brain. And for us to believe either A, you can't create things, or B, doesn't create art, it's just wrong. We have a biological substrate that has a non-biological substrate. They both are modeled after exactly the same set of processes, the same set of signals, all of those things. And so, surprise, surprise, humans have no exclusive monopoly over art. And I believe we won't even have a significant portion of it, except as an oddity like the banana or the Mona Lisa or the Da Vinci or something like that. Obviously, collectible stuff will, at the fact that it, by the way, it's like, how weird, right? We're talking about stories, or how weird that in 2034, you and I buy a piece of art, and the story that we cherish about it is it was created by a human being.
Yeah,
that's the story.
Yeah.
Right. And it's coming.
And if you go upstream of that,
mm-hmm.
what most people are valuing is the time and the energy that the individual put into the piece.
Yeah.
Because it's just so easy to go out and have anything made with, a couple keystrokes in 5 seconds of your time. People don't value something that only takes 5 seconds of somebody's time. They value something that took thousands of hours of time of the creator, I suspect. And that doesn't mean it will always be the case with you line up 100 pieces of art. I think a majority of the stuff that's going to be highly valued is the stuff that also has a pretty enormous amount of time associated with it, along
mm-hmm.
with a story, along with something that makes it
mm-hmm.
very unique because of the story. Do you agree with that, or?
Well, I do agree with it, but I have a premise that maybe you share, which is that a truly great inspiration, creative inspiration in this example, takes time.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly, the materials, some art takes centuries. Look at Notre Dame, for example, takes centuries, right? And literally generations work on it. Pyramids take long periods of time. But some great art really doesn't take that long. What it is it was just an inspiration that was, wow, I never saw it that way before. Oh my gosh. And the story is so mimetic and powerful that it's irresistible in some way. And then, of course, we've set aside already the point I think you made earlier, which is very important, which is there's just social cred in owning something. So the social cred piece, we both agree on that. Let's set that aside because it's less interesting than the mimetic quality about why art is attractive other than social cred.
Yeah. How do you see Bitcoin fitting into all this? So when we look at Bitcoin units, we both know that it's backed by energy, encrypted energy.
Yeah.
And this is really kind of the thing that sets Bitcoin apart from all the other protocols is that it's backed by energy. Mm-hmm. Is that truly the thing that sets it apart? Why is Bitcoin quote unquote winning in the face of everything else in your mind? And does that, whatever that quality is or qualities, is that what allows it to continue to win moving forward?
Yeah, I love this question. So let's go back to the point I was making earlier about the thing that creates value and sort of almost the honeycomb for bees is things that are both scarce and desirable. Okay, with that as a fundamental way to think about it, you've talked many times that there is literally nothing on earth that is both digital, frankly, even analog anymore, and more scarce than Bitcoin. Being, it is truly finite. It is just dumb. So you're not going to win. Nothing else is going to win. No other asset's going to win on scarcity. In terms of desire, well, okay, maybe a single Da Vinci, but not for long. We'll come to that in a minute. And then the second question, and this is the hard part for people to get comfortable with. People talk about volatility is the issue. I think volatility is an issue. It sort of amplifies the fear, but the real hard part is the desirability. And for that, the world of Bitcoin calls it adoption, which to me is the proxy for desirability. So at some point, I've bought into the thesis of scarcity, and I've bought into the thesis now of desirability as we approach literally trillions of dollars of market cap. And so those two things, boxes are checked. And so now my behavior is beginning to change, which goes directly to your question. I'll give you two quick anecdotes. Story number one, I, in July, decided I wanted to buy a little painting to go right here behind, right?
Okay.
And I had one in mind, and it was a cute little Warhol toy robot, sort of techie, but old school, and a really great. You notice it's not there yet. It's actually on the way. But what I said to the guy who was buying it for me, I said, you know what? I'll put a deposit down now, but I really don't want to pay for a few months. And he says, what? And I said, I don't want to pay for a few months because I'm feeling really good about Bitcoin and really good about some other assets I have between July of this calendar year and now. So I paid a couple of weeks ago, and lo and behold, the value of the thing, which hadn't arrived yet, the value of the thing has gone way down relative to my currency, right? Which was Bitcoin as an example. And so what does that mean? What that means is Warhol is worth less in Bitcoin terms to me in the space of 3 or 4 or 5 months. Warhol, an icon of value in the world of art. So that's story one. So already you can see that art, if I'm not alone, I can't be alone. If I'm not alone, Bitcoin is beginning to encroach even on things like art as a store of value. Second point, I'm literally coming back from, I think, North Carolina last night, late, landing in Miami at Drive Up, landing in Miami. And I'm sitting next to this nice guy on the plane. And we were talking about, it's really fun to live in Florida, and it was a beautiful night. It was great. It landed. And he says, do you live here? I said, yeah. I says, how often do you get to North Carolina? He said he goes quarterly. And I said, oh, you're on board? He says, no, he's an executive coach. And somehow we got out of real estate because you can't talk about Florida without talking about real estate, right? And he asked me, oh, do you live here? I said, yeah. He says, do you live anywhere else? Which is code for, are you also a New Yorker? And I said, well, no, the only home I own is actually in here in Florida. And he says, oh, that's interesting. Me too. And I said, well, why? He says, well, because, I just think it's I just only one home. And I said, well, he says, what do you do? I said, well, I actually invest in tech. And he says, oh, really? I said, yeah. And I also invest in Bitcoin and crypto. He says, really? I do too. Now, the guy is older than I am. I'm sort of a first year of the Gen X. He's probably a boomer, sort of few years older than I am. And we talked about it. Guess what? Both of us agreed that we wouldn't put any more money into real estate when we could put it in Bitcoin. In other words, even real estate in Florida is beginning to get eroded by that conceptually. And so I don't see that stopping, Preston. I see that beginning to accelerate.
Yeah.
And by the way, we're not Gen Z. We're not millennials. You're talking about, call it a boomer and a Gen X that is right on the cusp of boomer. I'm close enough to boomer to know it when I see it. So, so that's, by the way, if it's happening here, it's going to happen everywhere and it's inevitable. And my guess is it accelerates.
I think that the line of thinking of the two of you in that conversation is very early for most people that have really kind of preserved a lot of their buying power in real estate. Saylor talks about this a lot. It's like, hey, if your net worth's over $100 million, how are you going to preserve a lot of this in a way that's not super volatile or super risky? Well, you plowed it into real estate because interest rates just kept getting compressed for 40 years from the 80s until, COVID. And it was kind of a surefire way to just have some nice properties. You made a lot of money in the process, relatively speaking, to everything else that was out there. And there wasn't a lot of vol in all of it. And now I think that I truly believe what we saw in the compression of the yield curve and the compression of interest rates for 40 years, I think that we're in very early days of a lot of that starting to unwind itself. And for the people like yourself that are recognizing and seeing this very early, they're transitioning out of that. They're saying, I have to put some money. Yeah, I have to go somewhere else. I can't deal with this anymore. Yeah.
That's, by the way, the bellwether for me is my wife, who cares obviously about family finances. And she doesn't want to buy any more property.
Yeah.
She won't even think of it. She's like, no, absolutely not. Let's put it in Bitcoin. Let's put it into something else that's equivalent to Bitcoin or proxy or something. And it's a complete non-starter for her. And again, this is going to accelerate. I alluded to several minutes ago, there are ways in a fiat world we compensate for the fact that real estate or other things don't meet the hurdle rate. And we should talk about leverage briefly. When I'm talking about comparing real estate to a Bitcoin investment, I'm talking about two unlevered investments.
Yeah, right.
Now, the way we solve that, right, is we had the government give us a subsidy on our mortgage debt. And so we could have a long-term fixed rate at, I don't know, whatever it happens to be. If you've been in it a while, maybe you're as lucky as 300 basis points. If you've been in it more recently, it's 700 basis points and everywhere in between. So the way that we have managed to deal and outrun the money fair in terms of value is that we lever up. Now, I'm not sure whether that is good for society or not. It's not clear to me. But I'll tell you one thing, everything else being equal, and by which I mean if we're talking about unlevered versus unlevered, I would go with Bitcoin any day of the week.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you are still, you can do a hybrid too, right?
Yeah.
I think the ownership of one home is effectively the hybrid, maybe two, depending on what your net worth is.
You own your own home, then you can do whatever you want to it, that to me is a lifestyle expense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that this is such a salient point because people are looking at this and like, well, how did you outrun the money printer when it's doing 7 to 8% annualized if we're using M2 growth rate or whatever to kind of represent the basement? The thing is if you put 10, 20% down on a home and you were getting it at and this speaks to this cycle, this 40-year cycle, right? Let's say you locked in a 7% yield and then rates went lower. Well, you just refied and got it at 4% then, or you
100%.
3%.
Exactly
and
right.
So you were able to just keep that leverage on the whole time. And while the price just kept blowing out, as it was.
And for those starting out who want a home and they say, what do I do? I mean, this is not financial advice, but the observation, I'll say the best way to look at it is history. And if you go back, and I'm going to get the numbers approximately correct because they came around on Twitter, I think from Pomp or somebody. He said that the median house price in, I think it was 2016, was 666 Bitcoin. And when he said it again more recently, it was 6. Now it's actually lower because that was before the most recent pump. you look at that and you say, oh my gosh, if you just invest in an asset or you just put away a little bit of any sort of asset that's growing 50% a year, 43% a year, whatever the current growth rate is, you will catch the home. Meaning you will catch up. You will be able to afford one. Now, again, not financial advice, but it shows when you look at the way these assets are accelerating, Bitcoin in particular, you say that's pretty exciting. Now, admittedly, we've set aside the volatility. We can talk about that too. So,
what I think is going to be hard, especially for these younger generations that are, let's say you have a couple that they're 30 years old, they recently got married and they're wanting to buy a home. The advice they're probably receiving from their parents and others is lever up, let's go. And it's interesting because we're at such a strange shift, I think, as to what good financial advice is moving forward. And I think to your point, the volatility only makes Bitcoin that much more confusing.
Yes.
Difficult for people to wrap their head around. And a lot of the times once they become interested in it, it was almost always the worst time to become interested in it because of the volatility and then the speculative forces that brought them there to ask these questions. And I just don't know that, I think it's really hard to give advice to some of these people that are kind of in this period of their life, call it 30 years old. What kind of advice do you give to somebody like this who's just trying to break through? And it's very challenging with the inflationary forces that everybody's dealing with today. One of the most common questions I get asked from family and friends is, Preston, where do you personally buy your Bitcoin from? And the answer is really simple. I buy it on river.com. Not only can you easily buy Bitcoin with zero fees on recurring orders, you can have peace of mind knowing Bitcoin on River is held one-to-one in multi-sig cold storage, all while being fully licensed and regulated in the United States. Plus, their relationship managers are US-based and available by phone for you or your business. Additionally, River has built their own infrastructure from the ground up, which means they don't rely on third parties to function like other Bitcoin exchanges. River also just created a new feature not found anywhere else called River Link. It allows you to send Bitcoin over a text message to easily orange pill your family, pay a friend for dinner, or send a gift. There's a new standard for investing in Bitcoin, and River is setting it. Go to river.com/fundamentals and get up to $100 free when you sign up and buy Bitcoin. That's river.com/fundamentals. Holding Bitcoin is the best way to protect your family from the threat of fiat currency collapse. And few people understand this better than Tony Yazbek, cybersecurity expert and founder of the Bitcoin Way. Tony was in Lebanon when the currency imploded. He's seen the chaos that erupts when the ATMs stop working and the bank accounts get frozen. He knows what it's like to lose everything. But with his cybersecurity expertise and by fully adopting Bitcoin, Tony was able to engineer his escape. And now Tony and the Bitcoin Way team work to make sure this never happens to you. With over 25 years of experience, their expert training empowers you to self-custody your family's Bitcoin the right way, secure your devices and protect your privacy, develop robust inheritance plans, and secure for Plan B citizenship. The Bitcoin Way can transform you into a sovereign individual. You just need to take the first step. Schedule a free consultation today at thebitcoinway.com/TIP.
100%. I agree with you. I think it's very difficult to come up with advice. But I will tell you what I told my 25-year-old son about that. And it's not necessarily financial advice, but what it was a little bit of life advice, which touches financial advice, which is you too, by the way, Preston, because you're, I think, considerably younger than I am. One of the things to think about is the probability that you live a very, very long time. And I'm talking about a century.
Yeah.
And healthy century, not an unhealthy century, is really high. It's really high. By the way, every day it's looking better and better.
It's looking a lot better, right?
It's looking better and better by the minute. I'm telling you, it looks good. So, that's a point. The second thing, for the vast majority of that century, machines will do better tests better than you did, even creative ones, as we were talking about earlier. And what that means is how you think about building a life of a house ownership, as strange and controversial as it's going to be when I finish the sentence, is less important to me for my kids than how they think about a life of purpose. What does it mean? Because think about it. Well, certainly in my generation, all of us were creatures of the late industrial era. We got our education, or we got all of our life choices were not all of our life choices, worse than our professional life choices were framed around how do I earn a living? How do I have the ability, the blessing, if you will, to be able to pay $6 million for a banana and eat it? All of that. But that isn't going to be the situation with the generations behind us. They have a different question, which is, oh my gosh, I can't even make a piece of art that is better than a machine does.
Yeah.
So what is my purpose? And I don't know the answer to that question, but I'll tell you one thing, I'm optimistic. I think it means we're going to be freed up to think about what it really means to be human beings. And that's really powerful.
Oh, I like that spin. I like that a lot. But yeah, you're right. Like, this is getting weird, like really fast.
Yeah. And by the way, what does it even mean? Let's talk about money management. What does money management mean in the 2030s? You know, Raoul Powell talks about this, and he's not wrong. I mean, when he says it, he almost apologizes for talking about it because it sounds so completely crazy. But let's just step back. I mean, what does it mean to be managing money in the 2030s when the machines do it? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
HODL, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and I'm looking at it like, when we get an AI that can go out, do an assessment across the market and say, all right, I think there's an efficiency here that I can create with this piece of software or whatever.
Yeah.
It can then prompt itself to write the piece of software. It can prompt itself to go market the piece of software. It can prompt itself to set up all the deliverables to the receivables, and it's creating a bottom line on its own without a human in the loop.
Exactly.
Is this intelligence? Is this,
well, it's certainly intelligence.
Is this life when something can create?
Is it consciousness? That's the hard
consciousness,
problem.
Right? Yeah, that's because it's creating value for others at that point on its own. And I don't know. Some of this stuff gets super deep.
You go deep on this, but guess what? It's profound for anyone who thinks about money, value, investments, life, because it's here and now. It's not something that we can defer to the future. It's coming now. So 100%.
Yeah.
By the way, I have something to thank you for. Can I thank you for a minute?
Oh, let's hear it. What's that?
No, you appeared in January of this calendar year, and I should have dug it out before our chat. I'm so sorry, Preston. And there was a moment. I'll start. Quick digression.
Yeah, no, let's hear this.
I became interested in MicroStrategy sometime in the summer of last year. And so I bought a moderate position, and I don't remember what it was. I can't remember what it was. And of course, it went up a year ago. It had a nice rally. And then in January, I'm thinking, how do I feel about this with the new ETFs coming out if it's basically just an ETF? And it was actually you, by the way, and I don't remember where, I'm going to find out where it is. I'm going to send it to you. You made this incredibly thoughtful, eloquent description of where MicroStrategy could be going and why it would create value and why the ETFs were not a good model. And it's because of you, I didn't sell.
Yes. I love this.
No, it was so powerful. And that's why I think I said to you at some point how much I appreciate your wisdom in that, because it set in motion this whole other series of things that really created a lot of value for me and my family over a short period of time. And I'm eminently appreciative of your contribution. It's a real example of how you actually really have made a big difference, at least in my little. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Ted.
No, it's true. No, it's true. Honestly, and by the way, I'm going to dig out the YouTube. You run YouTube, and
man, that's awesome.
Makes a difference what you do.
It's more fun when you're lucky together, right, sir?
Yeah, 100%.
Let's talk about Michael. So this is getting really interesting. My concern moving forward, if I was gonna discuss this, the fact that you're at 3x the NAV or somewhere in that ballpark, 2.5 over what he has in the treasury. Back in January, it was easy. It was less than what he had in the treasury, and it would just kind of made a lot of sense. Now you're starting to get this really large premium because everybody's expecting him to go out. He's going to issue more shares, or he's going to do, coupon-less debt issuance. But some of this is also dependent on how far does the underlying Bitcoin price run. I'm of the opinion that I think 2025 is going to get really, like, we haven't even seen anything yet. Some of that is very speculative in the way that I'm viewing it. And I fully recognize that. But at a certain point, if the speculation gets too far, and if we go through another cycle and all these other things, there's going to be some point where I'm looking at it and I'm saying, hey, this is, and I'm just going to throw out crazy numbers, right? This is 7 times or 10 times the NAV. Like, what am I doing? I should just sell this and buy Bitcoin with this, or keep it in, if you think it's another cycle or market timing. I know I'm going on and on.
No, you're not.
My concern is, like, what is too far? And I know you have this guy, Jeff Punter, and some others out there that are looking at the whole GameStop scenario, and how the influx of short sellers is something that you have to really pay attention to, especially if you think that the underlying is going to continue to set new highs. They're going to blow out. You're going to get an even higher premium over the NAV. And, like, I don't want to leave too early if I think it could go to 5 or 10x NAV because of the short sellers and all these other things that are looking like a pretty high probability that are going to play out in the coming year. So with all of that, I'm curious your opinion, Ted.
Yeah. So let me tell you what I have been doing. And on November 5th, I remember because it was election day, I appeared in other contacts, and someone asked me about this, and I said I like the stock.
Mm-hmm.
And importantly, the stock was in the 200s at the time. Now, I am privileged to have as a partner in our investment firm, Dan Tapiero, who has been for years a very, very astute observer and a participant in the markets. And I asked his opinion about 2 weeks ago, and he said, Ted, I would take a little profit if I were you.
Yeah.
And, when Dan says something like that, and he wasn't giving financial advice, so he'd certainly give it to me. I'd take it. In fact, I'm an investor in the fund, so I rely on his investment advice. But I took it. And so what I did several weeks ago was collar the stock. And interestingly, that gave me a lot. And it also, on the high end of the collar, but the collar was approximately $300 to $600, just to give you real math. And then bought call options on the 600 because I was at the time thinking this thing could go far higher. It's so easy, right? Again, it's a story. I buy into the story of going up into the right. But one of the things that concerned me about it is exactly what you're saying, which is if we're in a world of price discovery, people can disagree on what the value of something is, particularly when it's well above MNAV. Now, we can make arguments about it, but really you and I are debating a story, or anyone who's short is debating a story with us if we're long. And in that environment, things can get volatile and the prices can plunge or soar, and they can stay where they are for long periods of time or plunge for long periods of time. And that's what's so powerful about taking profit. So I did buy a call option to protect me if it soared back through 600. And then when a week before last, I think it was, when it started going $75 per day, I took the call options off. And I think we got out at like 535, and now we're at 380 or something. And by the way, this is not anything other than luck, which is the discipline of taking profits when things get a little nutty is good. Now, I have to tell you, at 380, for my portfolio, I kind of like the stock again. I kind of like it again. Now, I wouldn't put as much as I had sort of in January a year ago, when you gave me a real vision about where it could go. But I think it's more interesting than it was at 500. And I'm not knocking the stock. I'm not knocking anything about it. I'm just saying the stock is mimetic. And above a NAV, when you start getting NAVs 2.5, 3, 3.5, 3.8, 4, anybody can just weigh in and say what it is, which means the value of that asset to me becomes more volatile than I'm willing to pay for. Yeah. And that's where it is to me today.
Yeah, I like to define it really into one or two buckets, which is, am I investing or am I speculating? And
yeah, that's
back in January, to me, it was just really obvious. This is an investment. It was trading, the the per share price was below how much Bitcoin he had per share. And I just saw that he had this flywheel that he could tap into, which is the public markets and also the debt markets. And I just saw that as something that I thought was really investable. Today, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, I don't want to sell my shares. I don't want to sell my call options that I have on it. But because I think that I think the potential of it getting crazier is pretty high.
Yeah, and that's why I have call options on them. It's got high possibility for asymptotic or parabolic needs.
Yeah. And so it's like, I continue to sit there. I don't want to, and I have it in a tax advantage account, so I could sell it and not really have tax ramifications, but that's always a really important consideration for people who don't have it in there. It's like, okay, like, what do you think this trend is? How do you assess that? And if you do want to pull some off the table and deal with the tax burden, like that's a huge consideration too, as you look for other places to put it. But yeah, in general, it's already getting hard to really kind of wrap my head around what the right point will be. But I think that we have another strong 6 months coming here, and I'm just going to kind of sit back and enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
See where it takes me. But
well, let me put it in my own personal opinion, I would feel really badly if I didn't have a call option or some position in it.
Yeah.
But you're right. I don't want to miss out the speculative fervor. It's different than it was a year and a half ago. Value proposition. Now, admittedly, the story about MicroStrategy is vastly more evolved than it was even 3 months ago.
Yeah.
Earnings call was a work of art in terms of story. And I'm saying that with admiration, I'm not diminishing what he did. But the story, and it's actually a story he wandered into, is incredibly powerful, and it has a mimetic quality set aside a sort of get rich thing. It makes sense, right? How do you unlock a multi-hundred trillion dollar debt market and give it access to Bitcoin in a world where the regulatory environment hasn't quite caught up, and there are lots of countries where you can't spend on it? Convertibles have a unique quality. All these things are positive.
The funniest thing to me, and I'll always remember this, I had this conversation with Michael back when he first bought Bitcoin in 2020, and he did this convertible debt issuance. And I want to say it was at like 75 bips. And I said to Michael, I think he could have done it for way lower. It was oversubscribed. Like, the fact that it was oversubscribed tells you could do it for like 25 bips or maybe nothing. Maybe it could be couponless. And I remember him just laughing at me and saying, Preston, I think you're overzealous. And then just this past 4 years later, he issued it with a zero coupon.
And you were right.
And that was oversubscribed by 1 billion.
And it was oversubscribed.
Crazy.
Exactly. So I don't know. We're on for a wild ride. I think it's going to be really interesting. I will say, I don't think his recent CNBC appearance was as clear as he has been. He is world-class at communicating. Mm-hmm. And that to me was not, I didn't really follow the story particularly well in that interview, for what it's worth.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he agreed. It's crazy how descriptive and detailed and thoughtful he can just kind of plow through something very complex. But what a ride. It's pretty exciting. All right.
What a ride.
This is my last question for you, Tad. Help us, because I'm no expert in art, and I would imagine most people that are listening to the show also aren't experts in art. When you're talking to a commoner like us that don't understand art, what is something that...
By the way, the commoner who taught me a lot about MicroStrategy, that commoner, you're a high... By the way, we all want to be a commoner like you, Preston.
Thank you, sir.
We're all going to queue up.
No, I'm serious. I'm a total idiot when it comes to this stuff. What is the person missing, or what is something that, for you being the CEO of Sotheby's for as many years as you were, that, like, you're in there, you're seeing this stuff. What is something that is missed on so many people that is somewhat obvious to a person that's played in this space for as long as you have?
It's really simple, embarrassingly so. I don't know how many times I've been asked, is art a good investment? I really don't. I mean, that question is 1,000 times a day forever. And by the way, I'm chairman of the board of the Fine Art Group now, which is the largest art advisory merchant bank. When I say merchant bank, we also do art lending. in the world. It's based in London. And so I still get the question. And you know what? Art can be a very good investment, in my opinion. But honestly, you should buy art that you love.
Mm-hmm.
It's really that simple. Don't buy. And by the way, if it's an expensive piece, maybe get a little help to make sure that you're not getting fleeced. But if you buy something you love, you'll always love it.
Yeah.
And by the way, and you'll become a part of the story of it, and the story will become part of you. And that's really what you're buying.
I love
Every
that.
time you look at it, you'll say, wow, that rocks. So
I love that advice. That's a win. That's a win. All right, Tad, I've really enjoyed this.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
I learned, yes, this is awesome. And hopefully we can connect again in the future.
I'll look forward to it. Have a great afternoon. A happy Thanksgiving.
You as well, sir. You as well. Bye.
I think I heard Saylor say, if it's good for 1 million, it's good for 10 million. If it's good for 10 million, it's good for 100 million. And if you take that concept and you start, applying $10 million per Bitcoin times 100, you start looking at those numbers, they're staggering. That is financial strength, because they have the ability to use those assets as collateral to generate a yield.